I need help. It's so cold outside and I'm going through hell. I don't feel alive, sometimes I can't tell. Cause every day I try, but I think I need help. Maybe if I fight, one day I'll be well. Want someone by my side, but I'm stuck in my shell. Want someone to rely on, but everyone's selfish, helpless, so damn jealous. And I just wish I never felt this. In this world from sea to shining sea, there's a way for me to go be free.
For the Institute of International Affairs, Ghana. I am here to give a welcome address to everyone. Excellencies, members of the diplomatic corps, esteemed guests, and members of the Institute, you are all welcome to today's event. Call it the Bogum Fireside Chat Series, a program of the Institute. A fireside chat is an informal conversation between a moderator and her guest. Interestingly, the term used to describe 30 evening radio address. Okay, so I'll just start again. Excellencies, okay. Excellencies, members of the diplomatic corps, esteemed guests, and members of the institute, you are all welcome to today's event. We call it the Bugum Fireside Chat Series, a flagship program of the institute. A fireside chat is an informal conversation between a moderator and a guest. Interestingly, the term was first used to describe a series of 30 evening radio addresses given by the U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt between 1993 and 1944. In the Ghanaian setting, the fireside chat was a program where people sat around firesides to listen to the elderly and elderly. It is in this tradition and that highly effective mood of knowledge sharing that has led us as an institute to craft this fireside chat. We believe it will become a platform for leading minds in Ghana's economics, sociopolitics in terms of academia, science, defense, arts, and international diplomacy to share their stories to enrich our lives and also to enrich theirs too. Today's event is in commemoration of the Black History Month and the International Women's Day, hence our annex distinguished. Black History Month is an annual celebration of achievements by African Americans and a time for recognizing their central role in U.S. history. Hence, the month of February has been distinguished as Black History Month. Our focus for today's discussion will be based on the theme, Celebrating Black History, New Ideas for Engagement and Integration, Africa and its Fourth Diaspora. I am confident that you enjoy this session, and I am sure we will leave here with nuggets of knowledge. Thank you so much for attending, and it is time for me to introduce a member of the Institute, Mr. Wilfred Kanga. Introduce our moderator, who is in the center of the Thank you for your attention and have a good day.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Winfred, a member of the Institute. I'm very honored to be called upon to introduce the moderator for this evening's program. The profile of the moderator, Kobna Opoku Ajiman. Kobna Opoku Ajiman completed his master's and PhD degrees in English literature at West Virginia University with scholarly interest in African digital literature. His work has appeared in different edited volumes, while he has guest edited journals such as Journal of Gaming and Virtual World and Carriers. He is a senior lecturer at the English department of the University of Ghana, where he earned undergraduate and graduate degrees in English. He is also the West African Anglophone editor of South Africa's oldest library. journals. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our moderator for this evening's program in the person of Dr. Kwabena Opoku Ajiman. Thank you very much.
Oh, for the recording. Okay. Good evening, and thank you for making it here. So I have the pleasure of introducing a national icon and national treasure. She's a mother to me. I have known her since I was this high, and now I'm a bit taller. So it's a pleasure to introduce Professor A.C. Sutherland, who is an associate professor in the language, literature, and drama section at the Institute of African Studies at the University of Ghana. Her scholarship is well known. It is well cited. It covers oral literature, women's literature, African literature, and creative expression. She has been all over the world giving lectures, sharing her ideas. She has been called upon in different capacities in this country to provide expertise on different subjects. Formerly, she has served two ministerial positions as Deputy Minister for Culture and Tourism and Higher Education on two different occasions for governments in this country, and she is overall a beast, as it were. I am privileged to have her here. The um, initial plan was for her to give a lecture, after which we would talk, but she seemed to want to gravitate from that. But we would still love to hear her thoughts on different issues, after which we'll have a conversation and then open it up for everybody else, because I think your questions and your comments are also very necessary and very helpful, especially considering the month that we are in and Ghana's sort of role in that commemoration, as it were. So, Prof, would love to hear you share some thoughts. Even if it's extemporaneous, it will be powerful. So, if you can do that for a while, and then we will come in with some questions, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm privileged to be here with you this evening. A few strings were pulled to try and get me to do this. And the culprit is in the system. I will not reveal who it is. um, it's uh, it's also good to have you in this space, which is a tribute to my mother, Ifwa Sutherland's idea that this city should have green spaces. And so this is um, something that she wanted to do before she died, and we've been trying to bring it up little by little. Um, so yeah, so it's one of our contributions to try to make Accra a livable city. So I thought that I would, share my this discussion from a personal point of view, uh, because I I was privileged to have two my both my parents were Pan Africanist activists in different ways, and they I think that they met over that sense of wanting to Africa to take its rightful place. So just to share the idea that my father came to Ghana on the recommendations of a very well-known historian called CLR James from the Caribbean. And so he came with a letter that um, George Padmore, who was a Trinidadian and who was an advisor to Kwame Nkrumah. This was in 1953. He was supposed to give him that letter, and then that was supposed to get to Kwame Nkrumah. And I'm afraid he was much more adventurous than I have ever been. I mean, just getting on a boat and coming across the seas to say, look, I want to come and share in the dream that had come out of the Pan-Africanist movement, particularly the Fifth Pan-Africanist Congress, which was held in Manchester in 1945, which propelled a number of leaders like Kwame Nkrumah and Jomo Kenyatta and so on to go back home and try to help liberate their countries from colonial rule. So I hear that coming here, in order to get to the shore, when you get to Jamestown, you had to be put from the ship into a boat, and then from the boat onto the shoulders of some very strong fishermen in order to get to the shore. That's what he told us anyway. Um, so he did come, and along with him were other African Americans like the Doctors League, Dr. Robert and Sarah Lee. And I want us to remember those people because they were the first dentists that set up in Accra. And they spent their whole lives here in Ghana and tried to establish um, dental health in Ghana, but also their idea of working towards getting the story, the narrative of enslavement and its aftermath told in a proper way, led them to start things like trying to restore the fort at Comanche, helping to set up the W.B. Du Bois Memorial Center, and so on. So, just to say that Ghana in around 1953, 1954, attracted, and coming forward into the 60s, attracted a large number of people from the diaspora who intended to be returnees, who intended to come and live here and be part of the dream of bringing Africa back to where it was expected to be. There, I don't know if I'm trying to remember his name, but one of the persons who started Alpha, a company which set up all the early traffic lights, was an African American. You had you know, the Encyclopedia Africana, which was established and run by African Americans, not least among which was W.B. Du Bois. But we need to recognize that Africa and Africans both, not just from the diaspora, but also from the continent, found Ghana to be somehow a great inspiration and a beacon um, for working on liberating the continent and developing the continent. And I don't think we realize how important this country has been to people around, people who are of African descent. And I really hope that all of you here will leave here with a very keen sense of the need for us, we ourselves, to re-educate ourselves about that sense of being a beacon. But I guess, at the end of the day, we need to talk about it. I guess we are living on past glories, and we need to rekindle our own knowledge and activism in this respect. So, of course, I wasn't there when my parents met, but But there, the New Year School. I'm sure many of you have heard of it. Well, it was being held in Cape Coast University, you guys, and somehow, um, in Cape Coast, and they got together, and here we are. But my father then became the secretary to K. Bedema, who was the Minister of Finance, but also worked on a number of Pan African initiatives that the country was undertaking. I think that it's important to talk about the issue of us letting ourselves down also, because by 1961 or so, he was beginning to be a bit despondent about the fact that the promise of a militant activist government was giving way to some levels of corruption and so on, and so, like many others, he went to Tanzania, which was also a very strong beacon in East Africa. But I'm saying this to say that the members of the African diaspora were looking for progress. They were looking to be part of a positively evolving um, African situation, the unity of the continent, the the anti-colonial movements and so on. So I want us to perhaps think about whether or not we've been able to live up to our own potentials, and what the diaspora or members of the diaspora have done and said should perhaps be a way of us checking ourselves about where we are going. Okay, so that's just to use one individual, but really there were so many different people from different walks of life. So we had writers like Julian Mayfield, like Maya Angelou. We had activists, Malcolm X. In fact, it's important to state that people working around independence, like my dad and so on, who his name was Bill Sutherland, by the way, but they persuaded Martin Luther King to come to for the independence of Ghana, and they swear by the fact that you know um, Ghana, the speech that Kwame Nkrumah made, that iconic one where he stands on the podium and talks about um, the independence of Ghana is meaningless. Apparently, they are convinced that the speech that Martin Luther King gave, where he said free at last, thank God Almighty, we're free at last." They are convinced that he was motivated by his experience at our independence. But anyway, so I mean, there were so many people who were not luminaries at the time. Let me take Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou came to Ghana um, a bit lost and looking, for something that would anchor her, and she was expecting Ghana to be that. Her experience here was not quite what she expected, but at the same time, it made her grow a great deal. And I would say that it had never left her. It had never left her. She um, you know after she had left Ghana, she was always lacing her, her when you had a conversation with her, and she's, she loved chatting. And when you had a conversation with her and we're getting into the chat and so on, she picked this up, I think, from Nana Kobnan Ketia. I don't know if we realized Nana Kobnan Ketia a political activist, and the chief of Second D, Isikado. His the next the current one is also called Nana Kobnan Ketia. But anyway, so he used to say, when he really got excited, he used to say Tobara, and so as she was speaking to, I mean, it used to amuse me because most of the people that she was talking to were probably not understanding, but she would just throw it in. If she saw a Ghanaian there, she would say Tobara. But but anyway, I mean, to be much more serious, this country, as I keep on saying, was held a sense of promise for the future. And so, talking about going up and going down, I would say that the 1966 coup d'etat, um, really, really burst the bubble for many, many people. And, you know, the fact also that it appears that some members of the diplomatic corps from the United States who were African American seem to have been somehow implicated in this, um, gives us a sense of the complexity, of the kinds of diaspora relations that there could be. Um, I want to mention the point that um, when you say the African diaspora, you can't, it's not one sort of homogeneous group of people. These are descendants of maybe 12 million people who were enslaved. And it's very important for us to note, and I quote Rabbi Cohen Halevi, who is a wonderful member of the African diaspora returnee community, who says that when people were leaving here, they were called Kojo and Kofi and Ama and so on. They were not called Bill and whatever. They had their names, and they were not slaves. They were enslaved. And so it's when they cross over, through the door of no return onto the ships, that they now, you know, lose their identity in a way that it continues to be difficult, I think, for those of us who live here to understand what that means. To not be able to ever go home again, to be treated like an animal, to be at the risk of death at any given time. I don't think that we realize, how short people's lives were if they did get across the ocean. The kind of work that they did and the kind of treatment that they had very short lives. But suffice it to say that, I'm saying that the African diaspora is vast and scattered, right? So their experiences in South America, which we have not acknowledged sufficiently, you'll be surprised how many countries in South America have African communities. To say nothing of the Caribbean, to say nothing of the United States, and even within the United States, that the experience was different in the South, it was different in Canada, and so on and so forth. So I don't think that we can expect all of these people to think the same way and do the same things, and the same for us, really. And I think that, I mean, while it sounds like an obvious point, I do want to point it out, because sometimes when African Americans um, express the way they feel and the way they think, we expect them all to be thinking in the same way. So there are African Americans who don't understand that they come from Africa. And I think that it's something that is difficult for us to understand. But it shouldn't be, because right now, many of us are speaking English to our children. We are not taking them anywhere near their hometowns. And they actually are suspended in a vacuum. If you do that for one generation, they won't be able to relate, and they won't be believe that they come from certain parts of Ghana and so on. I'm sure that we can talk about this. So it's, if this happens over 400 years, I don't know why we should be surprised that some of them actually just think that they come from wherever they are living. Some of them are angry that they were sold, or that is what they believe, and that is something that has to be discussed about what happened. And therefore, they don't want to have anything to do with Africa. Um, and some of them, and yet others are so keenly aware of the need to reconnect with the continent, and to have an identity, and to work around that identity to establish themselves, and to come to an inner peace that we don't understand either. When you can reach out to your mother, and you can reach out to your grandmother, and you don't feel like you're a minority, and so on and so forth, you take it for granted. But there are many African Americans, and again, I will use my experience of going to do my master's at UCLA, um, and some of our colleagues, Ghanaians, who we were going past a basketball court, and there were African Americans in the basketball court playing basketball, and then it was quite close to the university, and our people were saying, look at where I came from, so far away, a village. I've been able to find my way here, and you people are here. The university is a stone throw from you, and you're playing basketball instead of going to school. What they don't understand is that the distance between that basketball court and the university is far longer than the distance between their village then, because because of the way that the society is organized. So it is very, very important for us to try to understand what has happened, and why it is that we have to make the effort to get the narrative straightened out, so that we can share. Now, I want to make the point that there is um, the need for us to maybe try to understand why it is that the idea of Pan Africanism arose. I know that many people feel that it's a sentimental thing, its time has passed, we are in a global world, you can go anywhere you want, you can live anywhere you want, and so on. But it is very important for us to understand that in a setting like this, where you're talking about international relations, people are busy looking 100 years ahead, 50 years ahead, and planning how they want to situate their society and their community and their people and their economies and so on and so forth. Now, if we think that things are happening by chance, then I think we're making a huge mistake. Um, and when we come to talking about some of the things that are being set up right now, I'm just wondering what it is that is happening as far as we are concerned. So, the idea that people of African descent should be looking to each other, to, one, ensure that they know they create a place for themselves in the on the global scene is extremely important. That they create um, a situation for people of the continent and of African descent where they will finally be able to have their well-being being for if you like being on the front burner, and for everybody in the world to understand that Africans are going to take control of their destinies. Now it's very clear that if you have over 300,000, 300 million people of African descent around the world, plus those of us who are on the continent, it doesn't really make a whole bunch of sense for us not to try and take a look at what is going on with that. Um, it doesn't. With the other thing that I think is vital within that context is who controls the story that is being told. Who controls the story, because the way that the story is told um, can move from perception to reality. All right. And so when people want a certain reality that they are envisioning, if they say it over and over again, we're all going to believe it. I don't know if you've tried to do this experiment. These days, people don't have chickens in their house. But if you if you put a bowl of water and you take a chicken's head and you push it back and forth in that water for a little while, after a while, the chicken will just stay there. I don't know if you've tried that thing before. And it will be staring at that water. Yeah. So what you need to do if you want them to keep still and stay there is to just do that. Yeah. So that's and there's a way. It's mind control and so on. And so I think that we need to understand that. eh, Sitting down and being manipulated by other people, and then complaining that we are in a powerless situation. It I don't want to be rude, but it's time for us to understand that there's no way in which anyone is going to be able to tell our story better than us, is going to create a vision for the future that is better than our sense of a vision, um, and that we can do it, because that is the part that we have a problem with. um, and so I would like us to look very carefully at why it is that people like W.B. Du Bois, people like Sylvester Williams, people like Marcus Garvey have been telling us over and over and over again that our prosperity lies in unity. Um, and that there's always an effort to fragment us. Okay, so that is an issue. It's happening on the continent. It's happening in the African diaspora. I'm told, for example, that after the Black Lives Matter movement began, we now have a movement of African Americans who are looking at themselves as African Americans, Americans who just happen to be black, right? And um, who must safeguard their position in the United States, and who do not have any obligation to any other African, and most importantly, who must who must be wary of new African immigrants into the United States. And sorry, foundational black. So we have a situation in which that separation is being fostered between the historical African Americans and the new diaspora. this is very dangerous, and you can imagine if we're going to foster hate between those who go, the doctors and so on and so forth and all that, and the fraudsters and all that as well. But anyway, I mean, everybody, but really, I mean, that subtle way of making sure that we don't get on, um, is a very serious problem that we need to look at. It's as serious as ethnic conflicts on the continent, and we need to talk about, look at the things that unite us. All right. And one of the people that I admire very much today, so if we're going to move from those early influencers, influencer is now a word that you can't use. The inspirational leaders of the past, who go from maroons, who were fighting against, the plantation holders in all over the Caribbean, and in South America, all the way, up to, people, like somebody that I now really admire, who is vice the prime minister of Barbados. I don't know if you realize that Ms. Motley, um, is an amazing example of how we could show the world that we stand together on a number of issues. Um, Last year and the year before, we have seen her confronting the United Nations on climate change, on reparations, but also coming to Ghana and making it clear the meaning of our independence on our 65th anniversary and so on. There are these people that we can look up to. And when I say that, I don't, leave out people here on the continent, who are also, um, pushing. I mean, we go from, the Nyereres of this world and so on, who are able to say, you know what, I was pushing, for us to unite, but I was different from Kwame Nkrumah. He wanted us to unite immediately, and I was looking at the idea of us doing it regionally, but I was wrong. The ability for a leader to be able to say that, makes him all the more inspirational. So you have people like that. You even have, I mean, I guess that a couple of weeks ago, somebody was representing, the richest man in Africa, I guess, Dangote, yeah, in Ghana. I have no idea what business people do. So I mean, I plead the fifth on whatever else he does. But, for him to come and say to the leaders, around the continent, it is ridiculous for us to have so many, taxation, forms of taxation and so on, that you can't move, and I'm ready to go to different countries and set up, businesses. What are we doing? I mean, to get the business world to also be thinking like that. But the point I'm really making is that, we need to look at the stories that build us, the ones of people who, in spite of everything, are trying to take us forward. So when we look at new engagements, I guess, we can look at things on two fronts. One of them is acknowledging what people are doing. So for me, I'm excited about an initiative like this one. I'm excited about the people who are making niche chocolate. I'm excited about, you know, a young lady who apparently is using waste material, to make clothing and sandals. Those are the things, and because of a use of technology that builds us, not a TikTok about about abusing somebody who has gone for somebody else's husband. I mean, really, don't get me started. It is. I mean, but there are people who are using this technology, and breaking barriers and doing positive things. Um, so I that for me, and I don't know if anybody was listening to Joy FM this morning, but a young man called Akutubuafu, who I think he works for City as well, but he set up this virtual farming business where you can where you can invest in a farming business. He you can get returns of 17% or something. You can see that I was really listening. You and they do the farm for you. You can go and see what's going on, and then they look after the money and send it. But I'm just saying that these are the things that we need to look at about breaking boundaries, and about reaching out to the diaspora, to come in. I want to, you see, I said I wasn't giving a speech, and I've given one. I want to share a certain, you know sense, so for us to share a certain sense of Ghana. They're having problems with you. Oh no, I haven't lost it. I want to, for us to moving, as I sort of begin to wind down, is for us to think about Ghana taking reasserting ourselves, in the sense of bringing the diaspora on board, to return, and to live if they want, but at least to settle here in some kind of a way. Now, I think that there is a very serious level of disengagement, between those of us who live here and those of us from the diaspora, in general. Now, I'm not talking about the policymakers and those who are running the thing and so on, but our, as far as the general public is concerned, there's a certain distance over this, and we need to try and understand why this is, and also some of the old problems that keeping us apart are still there. So, for example, the notion that people who are coming in from the diaspora, um, are just sources of money, and so the thing is to get them to spend as much money here before they go back. The narrative that we have in that respect is ingrained, and it's a problem. Okay, so it's something that we need to discuss, why we think that we look at people from the diaspora in that sense, and how painful it is to them that they should be seen like that. There is a fancy proverb that says that "Asutore bin oyenyi ha ha," so if you are slapped twice, your eyes just pop out. If you are slapped once, fine, but another one, so they've been forcibly sent out. That's the historical diaspora. And in any case, even I was thinking that when we talk about the people who have who has forcibly left the continent, I don't think that those who go via Niger and so on, Libya and all that, are doing this of their own free will. So there is that dichotomy is problematic, but okay, fine. So they've decided that they need to be home. They need to understand where home is and so on and so forth. And they come back, and all we can see is money, or worse still, that they are European or something, and so on and so on. I mean, those kinds of issues have got to be looked at, in order for us to have, uh, for the leadership position that we are trying to take with respect to the diaspora, um, to be um, to be viable, right? So this is something that needs to be looked at. I mean, the more recent diaspora, so the Ghanaians, who go, and then there's always these stories about, they send money to their relatives to build a house, and then somebody goes and takes photographs of various buildings that are going on, and the day they come back, they either faint or die or something, because they've been shocked that there's only grass where they thought they had a house, and so on. When are we going to, deal with these sorts of things? Anyway, so the point that I'm really making is that we are not there yet. We I think that the initiatives that we have taken, some of them being Panafest, of which I'm the chair of the International Board of Trustees. I mean, it's it's wonderful that, we can say that we have the longest, lasting Pan Africanist festival in the world, which is true, because since 1992, Panafest has been alive, barely sometimes, but alive, and giving people the opportunity to come and experience certain rights and so on that make them feel welcome, at peace, etc. This having discussions about important issues like we're doing now, and so on. So there is that, and of course, more recently, there was, the homecoming that was, designed for for Ghanaians to come back and discuss, issues of how to integrate themselves back into the system. Um, there is now, the year of return, which was based on the 400th anniversary of the recorded, and I always want to say this, the recorded arrival of Africans in Virginia, because many Africans had arrived there before then. And you know the, the the idea of saying, okay, return, use this to come, and so on. Now they have come, and then what? you know are we really organizing ourselves to be able not only to receive them, but some of the things that will be or ought to be done with respect to the diaspora? If we were to do them, it will be good for all of us. Right. So if we have the lands department where you can go, and get a piece of land that hasn't been, sold to six other people, and it would be fantastic for all of us. All right. If we had a situation where, when you go to, um, do your Ghana card, or whatever, you don't have a situation like one of my nephews who was told that he can't be a Ghanaian because he's too fair colored. It, no, I'm serious. So the people who are on the front line, the way that they are trained is extremely important. Or you go to, you go to the north, and some of my colleagues who are working on historical narratives, some of the tour guides are talking rubbish. Seriously. I mean, they think they can say anything to anybody without realizing that the people are coming there have taken the thing so seriously that they know more about it than you do, and you have to work on it. Madam, you are smiling. It's a very serious matter. I mean, the the thing is, you know, the Picoro camp, and the Picoro camp is near Paga, and there are stones, there are rocks, and then there are hollows in the rocks. They used to put food in that for, it was a camp for enslaved people. Now, what, you know, the narrative there was that, you know, the camp was set up by somebody in the, you know, in the 19th century, in the 18th century. I mean, while the person died in 19 something. I mean, you know, it is not possible for this to happen. I mean, Ghana has to be the only place where somebody is like 300 years old or 200 years old. You know, I mean, and it's actually, you know, um, I'm saying these very mundane things because I want us to understand that these are the little things that make a big idea, deflate a big idea, and turn people off completely. So I would like to call on us to, you know, these are serious matters. If we want to do this, we have to do it through the system, from policy level to the level of the cleaner. Everybody, you know, has to be on point. And I'm saying again and again that this is not for the diasporans, it's for us. It's for us. It's about time we were able to trust each other. It's about time we were able to get together and do a business, like I was telling you about the farming business, and to trust that your 17% is going to come to you. I mean, it is about time. Oh, I'm not talking about, you know, haircuts and things, but but you know, so there is. I think there are a few bankers here. They can explain to us what's going on. But you know, I mean, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could get the trust enough to get our own capital and develop, so that we don't have to go cap in hand to various people. So there's a huge potential. We're still miraculously, I would say, um, you know, being admired. Many of you must have had this experience of going someplace and people thinking that because you're a Ghanaian, you come from this wonderful, you know, place, and they are looking up to us. We have to understand that this is a place that we have been put. Ghana has three of the most important Pan-Africanists buried here: Kwame Nkrumah, W. Du Bois, and George Padmore. There's nowhere people would kill to have that kind of legacy. What are we doing with it? Do we understand what it is? So I'm just saying that we must take another look at ourselves and see. So I will close by um, you know, encouraging us not to be, not to see ourselves as victims um, of somebody else, but at the same time to understand that people have ridden on our backs to develop their own countries. And it's about time we understood that we have allies within those countries that can work with us. I'd like us to understand the things that, and I'm saying to understand, not I hope that you don't, I'm not, I'm these are lessons that I have learned, yeah, which I'm sharing with you, that I think we need to understand that the movements that are going on, like in Britain, where you know, Bristol and so on, where they are knocking down statues and so on and saying this is not the way that the history went. Let's Their history has to be rewritten. In fact, I think in a couple of days ago in the newspapers, the Archbishop of Canterbury has come to say that the Anglican Church is going to set out 100 million um, pounds or something, you know, for reparations for their participation in enslavement. Yeah, Barclays Bank has, you know, they are part of it. You know, you have all kinds of, you know, the statues and masks and so on are being returned to Benin because they were stolen from there and so on. There's a certain admission by people of European descent that they have plundered and us. I'm not saying that we should see ourselves as victims. We have a right, and that's why the reparations idea has come up as part of international, the sense of how the world should be working, and we need to be part of that. We are very passive here, very, very passive. I don't think that we even recognize that all of this is being done, on our behalf by the people, our people who are there. So when are we going to stand up also and understand that we must claim, what is ours and then use it positively? I thought that perhaps the we could you know go away with certain um, ideas, and even though W.B. Du Bois died in 1963, he lived a very long life, and he was quite a genius about seeing the way that the world would be going. And there's something that he said, which I want to leave with us. And of course, we can have a discussion later on. And nothing I'm saying here, how shall I put it? I want to put it across as what I have learned, what has come to me from having exposure and so on, and which I'm extremely grateful for. I don't take it for granted. I'm extremely grateful that I've had to have that exposure. I was the person who was heading the team that that established the Du Bois Center and that moved the remains of W.B. Du Bois from Christianborg's castle to that site. I have seen his bones. Every time I say that, it makes me shiver. I have seen him, even in death, and I couldn't believe the immense, privilege of being able to do so, but for our country to have those remains. But he was a thinker, and he was somebody who changed his mind many times. He lived long enough to be able to do that. But there was something he said. Some of the things he said I think that they are perceptions that should live with us. And he says, now is the accepted time, not tomorrow, not some more convenient season. And I'm underlying the word convenient, not some more convenient season. It is today that our best work can be done, and not some future day or future year. It is today that we fit ourselves for the greater usefulness of tomorrow. Today is the seed time. Now are the hours of work, and tomorrow comes harvest and the playtime. Isn't that amazing? All right. So I think that we should feel encouraged. We've given up. We're despondent. We think that, nothing can come of us and so on. And I'm hoping that the hope that the diaspora has in us should urge us on to ensure that they can come home to what they were dreaming of. Thank you.
I think it's working now. Yeah. Thank you, Prof, for an insightful lecture. I think we took a lot from it. We'll open the floor for questions soon, but I just had a few questions that we could turn into discussion. So you have worked very closely with Panafest in the Year of Return. And in an interview with, I think it was Professor Adomako Ampofo, you spoke about the danger of turning the Year of Return into this commercial exploitation of the pain of diasporic Africans. So I'm wondering, from the way it has been marketed, right, and the way Panafest, as you said, has also ebbed and flowed and so on and so forth, are there any sort of larger lessons that you have seen working so close with it that you think could maybe help us evolve these experiences to make them more meaningful, not just to diasporic Africans, but to Ghanaians as well, so that we see that root of Pan-Africanism that's supposed to come out of these events rather than just the commercial or fun December thing that seems to be the case now?
Yeah. Hello. Okay. All right. So we're learning the lessons as we speak. One of the things is that it is hard work to do the outreach and get a buy-in from Ghanaians, and I think that is something that we should all think about. How do we get the buy-in? Do we not? I mean, even if it was, dances and parties and so on, don't we like dancing? I mean, what is the thing? I'm being facetious, but really, what is it that is keeping us from seeing this as something that is of importance to all of us? And it's work that needs to be done, especially with young people. I believe this is important. Another lesson is that, now I don't know if there are any people from Israel here, or any people from Italy or whatever, but I don't think that a pilgrimage, to Israel. I don't think that they don't make money in Israel. They make a lot of money from the pilgrims, selling stones and water and stuff like that, and experiences that, I mean, why are you laughing? Um, so how you tell the story, I keep saying it's extremely important how you tell the story. So if we market this thing as something that is going to bring another, 50,000, arrivals, and that means that each person spends, $20, 20, what is it, $2,000 times, and you are timesing the thing on on air. And no, I mean, I'm just, I'm just breaking the thing down. When you do that, you miss the point and you make people feel like you're using them. You will get your times, whatever it is. But Mark, talk to them and talk to all of us about the need for us to get together, about the dangers of not linking up, of the fact that, I mean, if people from the diaspora come here, and I'm very proud of City FM and the other stations who are taking people on tours around the country now. Some of them went to Asin Manso, and what they said, you would have thought that they didn't live in Ghana. They were so moved by this thing that is right here. So it's not an external experience. Let's work on that bit, because that's the lesson that we have to learn. And I think that our policymakers feel pushed to do that, for us to feel that it's justified to do this, and it's really an issue. I also believe that, what we're doing in schools is a problem. We're not, I don't know what, again, we can go around and so on, but what did you learn about enslavement when you were in school? What did we learn about it?
5 advantages and disadvantages of colonialism. Then we move on.
Okay, so you do that, and you expect that the person who comes out of such a system will have any sense of militancy to safeguard what they have, or to fight against things. And I just want to quickly say that, the this issue, it can be extremely important for, the jobs that we have, right? So I am very sure that the kind of exposure that I was privileged to have helped me when I was dealing with the World Bank and the IMF and so on, in the 1980s and early 1990s, because we went for a negotiation, and we wanted Winneba to become a university. They were insisting that we should only deal with primary education, and we were saying, like, who's going to teach those children, and so on. So we were insisting on it, and they then wanted to change the program, and they didn't do it until we got there, to Washington, and then said they were. And I said we were not negotiating. We going back home. They were so surprised. I said, no, no, we are not coming to the table, because this is not what what we agreed on. And so, anyway, long story short, they had to back down. But you have to know your stuff, and you have to be on top of it. And I'm saying it now because I'm old, so I don't feel shy anymore about saying these things. Honestly, so point that I'm making is that there are extremely serious lessons for us to learn, but the solutions are not sexy, they are not fast, they are not. It's a slow, persistent work that needs to be done. Yeah.
Thank you. I also like what you said about a comprehensive engagement with these issues, so that from the cleaner all the way to the top, we deal with these things. Because one thing that bothers me a lot when I go to the castles, and I've been to the castles a few times, is the fact that we allow diasporic Africans to pay more than Ghanaians. If you see, because of course they are not Ghanaians, so there's a fee for Ghanaians and there's a fee for foreigners, and they are lumped in with the white people, And I just wonder what that. I mean, of course, in the end, it isn't that much for them, or for most of them, because of their purchasing power. But I just wonder what that does, and how maybe if the tour guides and the people working at the castles understood this better, it might make them rethink this kind of thing. So I was just thinking about what you were saying about everyone needs to understand this from different levels, and I wonder how that can be done, because you are right. At the school level, we don't learn much about slavery, for instance, and yet we think about slavery in different contexts, and you have written about this in different ways, like the names of towns, the greetings that we have, and so on and so forth. So I'm just wondering about the connection between this comprehensive engagement and learning about these things, and how that can be done. Because I mean, the average Ghanaian walking around doesn't really think about these things, doesn't really care about them the way that we should. And with the ironies, like you are saying, 3 of the biggest names in Pan-Africanism were buried here, but also 2 of the biggest castles are within eyesight of each other. And so many people went through these places, the Pikro, Salaga, the different markets, Asen Manso. And even when you go into it, Salaga, for instance, I was there a few years ago. Yeah, it's nasty, but I'll say it, so brace yourself. So they're actually building over the markets. Yeah, and so I went there in 2019, so by now it's probably gone. So that history, even, yeah, there was a slave market where they sold people, and when you go there, it's literally being built over. So all they had at the time was a tree and a chain to the tree. But by this time, it might even be gone. Yeah, it is real. So I mean, I don't even think this is a question as much as just a lamentation of the fact that we don't let everybody understand what is going on. So then there is no sort of comprehensive engagement with it, and then even just learning about it seems to be out of place. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. I think I've said it. I think it's unforgivable for us not to train people to do their work, right? So, I mean, the same way that I saw that they were going around the market closing down nika nikas, because some they had, you know what nika nika is, eh? Because they put corn mills, because they put rotten tomatoes and this and that. I mean, I'm saying that it is it is as unsanitary as that. It is something which we need to ingrain into our system. We don't have a systemic approach, so it's not ingrained in such a way that somebody who is in charge, for example, of giving permits for buildings to be raised, will allow a certain sacred space to be built over, because they haven't had that orientation. It's we have to do something about it. Every now and then, for example, in the castle, you see that whether it's somebody's wife or cousin or whatever, you see them starting to, they put a small table there, there's toffees on top. Why? The question I'm asking is, this one person or these two people who are selling these, okay, we can't ask them, I mean, move them out. Because you do that, then a third table will come. So when the person enters this, if it were, seen as a sacred space, the first thing they see is peppermint, and why? What is that? You see, and I'm saying it this way so that we can see that it's these little things. And if it's your job to look after the castle, and you are letting your, you know, cousins or wives or whatever begin to do this, and before we know where we are, it will be a desecrated space. It's very easy for these things to happen. Very easy. So I am lamenting as well. We can all lament a little bit when this, but we really, it's the way that we haven't made it systemic. If you make it systemic, then it will be automatic for people to notice, because sometimes they don't even notice that there's anything wrong with this, you know. Um, and that's how it goes. And permit me to make the point that, I'm talking about this toffee matter, but really, you know, the thought has occurred to me also how we can then create spaces for these people to be able to trade in whatever it is that they trade in. There's, you see the what has happened in East Legon, where roasted plantain, has got, what do they call it in your, but how do you call it, you young people, when something has raised its level? How do you call it? How do you see it? Eh? It's been hyped. Oh, yours is too English. There's some way that is. But along the road, the roasted plantain, the ladies now use tongs. They put their peanuts in some container. They use a certain kind of paper. And people in Bugattis or whatever it is that stop there to buy the plantain, right? I mean, I'm saying that if we create a space and we create a certain sense, you can have a whole lot of people doing this petty trading, but not inside the castle. Madam, you live in Cape Coast. You have to do something about it. Yeah. Mhm.
Thank you. So you kind of hinted on this, but I wanted to explore it further.
Yeah.
Where these foundational black people, so there's this divide between African Americans, especially, and Africans in America now. So Adichie calls them non-American blacks, for instance. There are all kinds of names for them, but there's a issue where, like you were saying, Ghanaians go there and say, but you guys, you're not taking advantage of the opportunities and so on. But there's a whole history where when they took advantage of the opportunities, they were actually, like, all kinds of things happened and so on and so forth.
Yes.
But it's gone to the extent where Cornell University, which has the oldest African Studies program, a few years ago, their Black Students Union split. So they had the African American Students Union and the African Students Union, where they felt that the Africans who came more recently were taking the scholarships and doing all those things, so it was hampering them. And that speaks to a larger problem.
Right.
Then in Ghana in 2020 or 2021, there's a musician called Ari Lennox. She came here, and she's a young African American singer, and she was just happy to be here. Like, she wasn't stopped by the police, she wasn't going to be killed, she wasn't suffering racism and so on. So she just went, like, to the beach and I think she did a live video or she tweeted or something about how she felt at peace. Then Ghanaians came after her that, hey, but you two, why are you saying like as a Ghana they be? You know, how can you come and be saying Ghana is nice and all that when we are suffering here? So there seems to be this problem where African Americans, for instance, like are not very happy with Africans who come and take advantage of situations there, or opportunities there. Then Ghanaians and Africans here are also not happy when African Americans come here and are at peace. Like, I mean, if you have ever lived in America, when a police stops you, you literally can die. It's not even a joke. Like, you can die. Like, just because they stopped you, they can just shoot you. Like, you can even have a Facebook live video on, they will shoot you and kill you. And it has happened before. So just coming here and being at peace, people were angry because the economy is the economy. So I'm just wondering, like, of course, this is rooted in how we learn about these things. Is rooted in a whole level of narrative control, as you're talking about, and so on and so forth. But are there ways in which we can try to sort of stem the tide and then turn it around, so that, like, because it's honestly unnecessary that these things happen?
I think that we should all share on this. I think we should all share on this because it's been happening. The divide and rule thing has been happening over centuries, and it gets ingrained when that sort of thing happens. So, I mean, people in America, Ghanaians in England, you know, they call people from the Caribbean Ashramfo, yeah, people who come from among the sugarcane plantations. Now, if you know what happened in those plantations, how people got ground up along, you know that, the sugar in the bills, yeah, sometimes if your hand gets stuck in, you are going to be part of the sugar and so on. I mean, no, seriously, I mean, honestly, it's so we've been doing this for a very long time. How we get out of it, I think, is to speak directly to each other. There's been so many centuries of us hearing about each other from other people, from the news and so on and so forth, what you hear. And also, of course, I mean, you guys have to educate me about the social media thing, and you who are young, because I don't understand, you know, the whole thing. And especially with respect to how we want to portray ourselves. There's what the films have done, you know, to set a certain image of what it means to be an African American, and you're either a gangster or you are or you are a maid, or you are, you know, so those stereotypes are there. And how do we break those stereotypes? We have to make our own films, you know, about how things you know, how things have happened, and what it is that, what kind of images we want to portray. I keep saying it's a slow, tedious process. But please, I would love for us to talk about it when the floor, you know, is open, because some of these things, everybody has to bring their mind on board for us to try and see what to be done.
So I have questions all night, but I think it would be fair to have people ask questions. So you're invited to share a perspective or ask a question, however you want to. That'd be great.
There's somebody over there.
Yes, please, you would like for you to introduce yourself? Yes, please. So we know you are networking. Yourself, your name, and where you're coming from. Yes.
Thank you. I'm Nana Akusia Sewa Seoyo. I am Director of Admissions at Academic City University College, but more importantly, I'm a PhD student at Kwame Nkrumah Institute of African Studies. And I just want to say, and I think I've been here about 20 years, and this is the first time I have seen an open dialogue about a conversation that is real and speaks to some of the necessary work that we have to do to bridge this cultural divide. So I just wanted to say thank you, and I will give the floor to the other questions, but thank you.
Please, who else asked a question?
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is. Yeah, my name is Siawa Sare, a research coordinator for an archive institute. But basically, I remember reading All God's Children Need Traveling Shoes. Mama Maya Angelou writes that. And there is a point where she gets to Kita. And as she gets to Kita, we have one of the local women in there who sprung to her and she starts mourning. Basically, she's mourning because Mama Maya Angelou to her looks like a daughter whom they had lost as a result of the transatlantic enslavement. So this woman, basically, she had not even, well, she explains that she was told that, you know, they are told stories of back in the day, all of, like everybody in the town would just be taken away and then the children would be kept safe somewhere. And for her, seeing Mama Maya Angelou, it was just like, oh, one of the long lost daughters had returned. But it makes me think of like, you know, the pain for those also who, or for those of us who remained here. Because normally when we talk about enslavement, you know, it becomes like a story of the people in the diaspora and not necessarily a story of, and doesn't necessarily include us. It also makes me like recall an excerpt from, and please permit me to read a paragraph from Kwejo Opoku Ajimai. I don't know if you are related in any way. Oh, okay. An excerpt from the book like Cape Coast Castle, which is like a collection of poems, but a place that really got me thinking. And this makes me also think about how do we get like people here to understand that, you know, whether they return or all of this talk, they are also an active part of it. But I feel like we also have to maybe make people understand that the story of enslavement is not necessarily just a story for people in the diaspora. So it's not like enslavement is for people in the diaspora and colonization is our story. But basically, we are all like affected and affected by all of these historical happenings. But the paragraph goes and he says, or he writes, and yet what we read is not the full story, only a portion of it. For Equino's mother came home from the farm one evening to find her only daughter and youngest son stolen, never to be heard from again. We do not know her story. Nobody knows the story of her grief. The captured Africans left behind them graves without bodies in the collective memory of surviving kinsfolk. This remains one of the most enduring, oppressive, and difficult legacies of the European slave trade in Africa, a gaping spread of pain, wounding and widening and deepening the suffering of the victim society through the process of time binding. To discover a measure, one small teasing inkling of the impact of slavery and the slave trade on African societies, we shall have to think of Equino's mother, her pain and suffering at the sudden and irrevocable loss of her children, the uncertainty and wild fears she carries all her lifelong years. We shall have to consider the measures she takes, orphaned mother, and the adjustments she will make to her life, to her family, and to her society. And then we shall have to take this bundle of untamed agonies and multiply it not by one woman, not by one family, not by one fearful village, but by a continent full of people, living heart of unspoken fear, we shall have to consider what such precarious living does to motherhood, fatherhood, attitudes of child rearing, community organization, education, the arts, religion, science, medicine, the very ontological basis of society. This is merely a way to enter Africa's culture under siege. So this is an excerpt from Cape Coast Castle. But also say that, also to link to the point on reparations, because last year we had our president talk about, there was a whole conference then on reparations, and that also led to that divide amongst, those calling themselves the foundational blacks of America, and also, Africans here as to who has or who deserves reparations. But I only bring this also to link to maybe once we let people know that the story of enslavement is not just a story of people in the diaspora, but also of surviving kinsfolk, maybe the story may begin to sound more, or it will drum close to home. Thank you.
All right. My name is Fabian Selom from Sukasa Properties. I would have a question, and I would also want to put something across. Well, I've realized that it's actually quite difficult uniting, I would want to say blacks, because even whether the diaspora or the Africans here in Africa, it's difficult because you look at both angles and it seems everyone has a narrative they want to choose. Now, I only believe the PR for the year of return was marketed that way, or was made to look like an investment opportunity for Ghana, or was more tuned towards economical advancement, because there was no other means of uniting us. Okay, the reason why I'm saying this is that we didn't have to wait for 400 years, or we didn't have to wait for this year of return to be organized for people to know that they need to come back to Africa and come and learn, or for people to know that they need to come back to Africa and come and network or come and study about Africa. You don't need the government of Ghana to put up a flagship program before you come back here. If you want to come back, you didn't have to wait. So I believe the government just saw this as an opportunity to say, hey, guys, come back to Africa. Come and invest. Because I believe that was one thing that he was preaching. That was the gospel he was propagating, that it's a very good investment opportunity for us Ghanaians and a very good investment opportunity for them as well. Because when you come here, you are going to see things that you would want to invest in. You would want to see businesses that you would want to start and all that. So I just believe that that was one way he felt, or that was one way the government felt that they could market this. Now, the question I have is, like I was saying, we didn't have to wait for the year of return, and even beyond the year of return. I know Ghana has positioned itself as the gateway to Africa, and we've had a lot of the celebrities trooping in. I know someone was saying recently that Ghana has become so normal for the celebrities that you could just be walking and then you see Idris Elba or anyone, David, all of them are just around. You could just go into a restaurant and before you know, there's Rihanna sitting next to you. It's become that easy for them to come because of how we have made it look like. And I've realized that a lot of African countries are actually learning from this. There's Rwanda that is also doing the whole Visit Rwanda thing, sponsoring clubs. I just believe we didn't have to go that far, okay? If the foundation was set up right from the beginning, if those in the diaspora learned or had that passion to come back, we didn't have to buy them to come, or we didn't have to advertise. Now, advertising, it makes it sound wrong. It's like your mother is advertising for you to come back home, like come back, and or I'm giving you reasons for you to come back. Yes, it would sound all right in some sense, But then again, we also have to think about this, that we, from this angle, and those in the diaspora, what are we going to do about this moving forward? Because beyond the return, what is going to happen? Are we still propagating, come and invest, come and invest, come and invest? That is why people would want to take advantage of those coming from the diaspora. And it affects us because these hospitality industry, I mean the hotels and all that, the restaurants, during December, they shoot up prices because those from the diaspora are coming. Now, someone is going to buy food for, maybe someone can afford a room in a hotel, $100 a night. That's okay because of the purchasing power. But for the Ghanaian, $100 is just too much. So it brings all these issues. And at the end of the day, you are even asking yourself what the government was propagating concerning investment opportunities and we getting money. Is it actually reflected in our pockets? Because beyond a year of return, and you are not seeing these results, or you are not seeing this. I mean, this is, I wouldn't want to, I mean, go towards the government and say this and this and this and that. But all I'm saying is that let's not wait for December. Let's not wait for a flagship program. Let us preach this out there that, guys, this is your home. We are yours and you are yours. We don't need any divide. We don't need to ask who deserves this or who does not deserve this. This is our Africa. Whether you were born in the United States, this is your Africa. This is where you started from. These are your roots. So I just believe the earlier we start preaching these, the better for us. Because as you were saying, even with the colonization things we were studying, I mean, in SHS, GHS, it made it look like we are supposed to fight these people, or we are supposed to have something against the white man because of how he treated us. I just believe that we should just find a light in this. It has already happened. Who deserves this or who does not deserve that is an issue of the past. We just need to look forward. Generations yet unborn. What are we going to leave behind for them? Right? What legacy are we going to leave behind? Those in the diaspora, what are they going to say about Africa? It will sadden you to know that I'm on social media and I see a lot of these things. You ask them how many African, they don't even know Ghana. Okay, sorry. They don't even know Ghana. You can ask them how many African countries there are, and they'll just tell you South Africa and Nigeria. They don't know these African countries, so there is no connection. So let's try as much as possible to build this connection. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so we've been online since 6:30, so we have some questions and contributions from Zoom, especially. So we'll be having those shortly. Yeah. In the meantime. Okay, so after the Zoom.
Okay,
then,
so after the Zoom. Okay, so after the Zoom. Okay, so
I was being repeated.
both perspectives and perhaps better identify a meaningful roadmap as to how the two societies and peoples can effectively reunite, quote unquote. So we have a basic idea. We need roadmaps and pathways to reuniting. And I think first and foremostly, what we need to understand as the principal pathway of reunification is truth and reconciliation. All right? So if we don't talk about truth and reconciliation, you would find that it continues to be a very disruptive undercurrent to effective reunification. So here's what I mean. Professor, you mentioned in your beginning that there are some Black Americans, for instance, who do not know that they are from Africa. I entirely understand what you mean, but I would say it in another way. I don't think there's a person of African descent who doesn't know that biologically they originate from the continent. But I think sociologically and psychologically, there is a large group and number of them who reject the acknowledgement of their Africanness because they consider that they were sold and that they were unjustly treated and that their selling and dehumanization was a result of a collusive enterprise between the Europeans and the Africans as sellers. Now, that's why I say fundamentally, we need to start the path of reunification by taking a hard, long look at ourselves in the mirror, accepting the part we played in this ugly chapter in human history, and thereby taking steps to make amends by simple apology and seeking thereby to repair hurt feelings. I think once we get over that hurdle and once it is done in a proper, open, official, cohesive manner, you will begin to realize that you've gone some measure and way in getting more Black Americans or diasporans, some of them, to begin to acknowledge their Africanness. So that would be the first comment I would make, that we have to find a constructive, formal way of finding out how to do that. The next pathway that we have to open up, in my humble opinion, would be for establishing an identity pathway with diasporans. What I mean by that is, and you did make a good point, Professor, about the fact that, you know, we are not the only people in the world that go back to the motherland. And the Jews did that and continue to do that. But you would find that they have a sort of a very structured and understood way of reintegrating themselves back into perhaps the tribes of Israel and Jacob and the sons of Israel. Now, why can't we, for instance, as you say, make fun in creating identification through things like that? This is what I mean. For instance, you'll always have Black Americans that remember their grandparents or their parents speak certain words or say certain things or have certain phraseologies that are originally African. You would have certain cuisines in Louisiana and Southern America that you can find direct similarities to cuisines in Ghana and West Africa. We should have a fair where or a festival where we have a know your tribe contest. Something made fun where all the tribes in Ghana could have stalls, and you could have Black Americans come into these stalls and in a very interesting way try and find out which tribe they most closely identify with. And in that way, the identification with us becomes more meaningful. And in that way also, we can begin to better integrate them into our culture. Now, we mustn't forget that modernization is also moving Ghanaians further and further away from our very own culture. And these people from outside are looking to reintegrate, and primarily they would be looking to reintegrate into our culture. And so you're going to have on the back of the stuff I'm talking about, the buy-in, to borrow your phraseology, of the chieftaincies, the skins, and the stools in acknowledging this reintegration. It's not enough to just say a Black American can come and get sworn in and get a Ghanaian passport and leave it at that. Because all that would happen is you would create a group within a group, and you will fail to integrate them. And then you could end up down the line with certain social difficulties and problems. So, I mean, I only wanted to say, I think that we should work harder at developing a roadmap with these types of pathways: reconciliation, truth and reconciliation, and how to go about that; identification, and how to go about that; integration, and how to go about that. Another comment within the integration comment is the fact that I think that there's an overfixation that we place here on things like the slave dungeons. I choose personally not to call them castles.
Okay.
Because I don't know that any
sorry.
kings ever lived there or ever visited there.
Sorry,
They
to
are
cut in quickly.
dungeons and forts.
Okay.
And, you know, I think we overfixate on those as defining the story and legacy of diasporans and what we have to
it's because of what happened in the past. But like you are saying, things happen and we just brush it off. Um, I I was I was impressed to read in the history that in the First World War, soldiers from Gold Coast went to fight in Ethiopia. That is how come women got trinkets in Ghana, which we call Abyssinia. Because when they were coming back from the war, they brought trinkets. And it was very cheap. And so a lot of women bought it, but it was very poor quality. So Abyssinia trinkets became, you know. And yet, when you read the official documents about the First World War, it's almost silent. It's as if nobody in this part of the world participated in it. But the amazing thing is that we ourselves never speak about it. We never talk about it. There's a monument here in Accra erected by the colonial authorities for in relation to the First World War. And they put bronze plaques on the monument with the names of the servicemen who lost their lives there. If I were to do a census, does anybody know where the monument is? When you go to Jamestown, just as you turn to go down to the harbor, opposite lighthouse, it's still standing there. Somebody has taken over the place and is making the umbrellas for chiefs. That's where they manufacture it. And then during the economic difficulties times, when the scrap dealers they went and removed all the plaques and sold them. So the monument is standing there with no. And yet we have a Ghana Monuments, Museums and Monuments Board. And this monument is next to James Fort, which is also a monument. So here is a country where we don't respect history at all. And monuments which point to the legacies of the past are left. You know, that is why you find that even our cemeteries are desecrated. If you give us a chance, Awudome Cemetery will build houses there tomorrow morning, forgetting that our grandfathers and our parents' bodies are there. So this is a community which seems not to respect itself. We don't respect, because if we respect ourselves, we will ask ourselves, where did we come from? How come we are here? Why are we the way we are? You know, and until we are not going to be able to extend the respect to other people. But we need to respect them in order that they will feel comfortable to come. So I'd like to leave a thought for us to think about generally. Professor, you made a point that this is going to be a slow, tedious effort. I agree. Part of the effort is that we have to begin to learn, to teach and learn history in a slightly more enlightened way than we have been doing before, so that we can bring ourselves to connect with the past properly and honestly, so that we can use that as a platform to move forward into the future. If we don't see the castles, or if I don't know whether we want to call them dungeons or castles, but if we don't see them as monuments with a story behind it, Then we will walk around it, and the fishermen in Cape Coast will go and defecate around it, and and because they don't see it, they don't see it as anything important. Thank you very much.
There's somebody behind there.
Thanks. I'm Charles Sansre, and my thought is on what engagement model should we employ going forward? Because I think we are not the first trying to engage with our diaspora. Other people have tried that. Have we developed a systemic? Mr. Zueni, for instance, said our approach has to be systemic. Have we designed or developed or adopted a systemic model for engaging with our diaspora, or we just wake up and when we feel let's do this, and then we sort of want to put it in action? And if we have not, Doctor and Prof, if maybe you can get any of your students or if yourself, you can take it up to see if we can design a module, a strategy for engaging with the diaspora. Yeah, thanks.
So we were supposed to wrap up by 8:30, and we are past 8:30. So if you can just use 30 seconds, Prof will wrap up, and then we are done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Winfred, a member of the Institute. My question is, there is this perception that the African sold their own children to the whites. That is why the pain is there. And for them to come back, that will and zeal is not there. What is your thought on that? Thank you very much.
All right. That is a very, very complicated matter, because you can have a situation where people pour oil on problems because they can see that you have a weakness, and so they can. I don't know if you've seen it in families. There are some people, that's the work that they do, and you will never talk to your brother ever because of that person, and it's that sort of situation that happened with the Europeans coming through. I mean, where they would fund, if we had wars between, they will fund so that you could get, prisoners of war to be taken away. They didn't care if you had a corrupt leader. They would definitely, and they are doing it now. I mean, you know that, of course. I mean, I mean, if you look at Galamsey or whatever it is, I mean, where, in a town, and under the chief's house is being dug up. Anyway, this is not a place for this kind of discussion. But I think it's important for us to note that, I mean, it is true that we had enslavement, and maybe you should have a session, Kofi, on this, where Professor Kosia Pebi can explain to us the kind of servitude and so on that we had on the continent, and the mindset that we had, that probably this is what was going to happen to the people who were sent off. But it is very clear that the coming of Europeans certainly intensified enslavement, and also the type of enslavement where they were treating human beings as animals and chattels and so on and so forth. That was not what was happening on the continent. But it is important that we know, of course, if there's a trade, then somebody is selling and somebody is buying and so on. So that has to be, that's why I think Charles was talking about and I think Mr. Chian also about being honest, about what has happened, and trying to realize the intended and unintended consequences of what was done. But I think there are many people who may not want to come, but many people do, because this is home. I don't know how to put it, but it is home. And so whatever has happened, if you will only say, I acknowledge what happened and we are sorry, you will be surprised at how many people would just let it go because they need to come home. They are somewhere where 400 years of this it's still impacting them. They are still being treated in a certain way because they are descendants of enslaved people in those communities. So it's not past, and I think that is very, very important. I mean, I think it was Sule Montari who said that, I mean, when he was playing football and people were making monkey noises at him because he's black. It's still here, you know and so I think that's what I would say for now. We need a deeper discussion of this thing so that we understand that the force of needing to belong somewhere where you feel safe is greater than that, and will create a sense of forgiveness if we acknowledge it. So as Charles was saying, and as this gentleman was saying, some of the things that we have set up have to be done consistently and systematically. You can't do it once and leave it. So atonement ceremonies have been held. They continue to. Some of them are being held in Salaga and so on. So there are atonement ceremonies that are held. Even in Panafest, we do atonement ceremonies. But it has to continue, and it has to be publicized and so on, so people know that this is what is happening. So it's a bit, as we said, it's a lot of work. But I wanted to round off, by something that I had forgotten to mention, and that is that, this is the last year of the International Decade for People of African Descent. And when we talk about, foreign relations and so on, um what has happened, with it? It's metamorphosed into the permanent forum for people of African descent at the United Nations. But what is important, if we talk about diplomacy and so on, is that Africans from the continent have got to involve themselves in this process. It's the same thing with the reparations process. We have to try and understand and involve ourselves at the governmental level, at the level of the AU and so on. I think that those things are important. But also, the United States established the Advisory Council on Diaspora and Engagement, the President of the United States, in December. Now, I want we need to be looking at why they think it's now important to do this. And again, it's like somebody else taking over the narrative and saying, I have this advisory council on diasporan affairs, so it means that I'm dealing with this situation. Are they? And if they are, why are they doing it? America has lost a lot of grounds in Africa. And so the Russians and so on, and the Chinese are taking over. They need a foothold on this continent again. All right. And so if we sit around, and we are not looking at the diasporan relations and how they benefit us, but it will be used to, I mean, somebody is going to use that to their advantage again, So I really feel that for this, the whole question of what are global relations, and if, what's the place of Africa, and how does Africa leverage its diaspora to get back into the saddle. I mean, if we don't see these signs, it's going to be a real pity, because we are going to go down a path that doesn't take us forward very much. So I think that's what I would want to say. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So just quickly, Charles Rennes wanted to correct a misconception.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, he simply said he said he didn't agree with the castles being called castles, and he said some other things. Thank you all for this wonderful engagement. Thanks especially to Prof for sharing so many powerful, important perspectives. It's important to not let this conversation end here. In your personal capacities moving forward, you think about what you can do in relation to this whole Pan-Africanist idea and vision, especially because, Ghanaians, we typically don't understand race because most of us are black here. So we don't understand how discrimination against someone because of skin color can go all the way to where it goes in the US. It's important to learn about these things and take it in your own capacity moving forward. So thank you very much. And thanks also to the Institute for organizing this. Check them out on social media and you can network with them moving forward. So thank you. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you very much. I think there's been a lot of talk. It's time for us to talk to each other, network over some drinks. But first off, I'd like to say a very big thank you to Professor Sutherland Adi. Please put your hands together for her. When we reached out from the institute, she didn't hesitate. She agreed to share with us her insight, her knowledge about the topic, and I believe we've all learned a lot. And like she said, this cannot end here. We need to have the conversation moving forward. Also, I'd like to appreciate the moderator. Please put your hands together for him. It's not easy. I realized that my senior colleague Jerry at the back was helping us. Please put your hands together for him. We all have 1 minute remaining, so I'll be brief. Thank you all for coming. I would like to acknowledge the presence of a rep from the Rwandan High Commission. If you could give us a wave. Fantastic. Also from Academic City, I believe, yes, you asked the question earlier. And from the Legon Center for International Affairs and Diplomacy. Anyone from here? Oh, great. And the African American community, anybody here? Yes. So thank you all very much. This happens every month. Next month, we have an interesting conversation with the Australian ambassador to Ghana. It will be very fantastic if all of you go come. Take a few minutes and check out the membership options and the institute. So thank you, and food is served.
Mixing the best international music. It's your favorite DJ, DJ.
We have an interesting conversation. Somebody with the vibe right now. 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 Tell me what you see when you look at me. So thank you. Food is served. My problem is